Afternoon, sir.
Yeah, so you can hear me.
We can hear you all right. Thank you.
No, it is.
We will start in exactly 4 minutes. Malawi, good afternoon.
No, it's just a matter of connect. It's just a team.
Good afternoon, Tanzania. I see you have registered your presence.
Come on. What?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
You are welcome and thank you very much for joining.
Yes, sir. Yes, madam. Look.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Namibia, good
there
afternoon.
is also a colleague of mine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Bob?
We can hear you, Advocate Rollins.
Barbara? Hmm? A problem.
Good afternoon, Malawi.
Good afternoon, ma'am. We are in.
Thank you very much for joining. You are very welcome. Good afternoon, Kelly.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
2 minutes to 2 o'clock. Is the SADC PF ready?
Hello, Barbara.
Good afternoon, sir.
Buena.
Thank you, Barbara. I believe SADC PF is ready, and also our drafter, Ms. Eva Jala. I believe she's already connected. We are just ready for the meeting to start when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So it's exactly 2 o'clock. We have 9 member states present. We are still expecting DRC, Eswatini, and Lesotho. So they will join us along the way. The chairperson, South Africa, Secretary General of the SADC PF, Ms. Boemo Sahoma, Head of Police SARPCO at the SADC Secretariat, Ms.
Recording in progress.
Head of the Regional Bureau Harare, Mr. Mubita Nawa, representatives of SADC member states present here, our consultant, Ms. Eva Jala, colleagues from the SADC Secretariat, RB Harare and the SADC PF. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Welcome to this consultative meeting this afternoon. My name is Barbara Mchenga. I am the Transnational Organized Crime Officer at the SADC Secretariat. Our program this afternoon is kind of tight because we only have 3 hours for this consultation. It will start with a session of remarks where we are going to hear from the Senior Officer Police at the Secretariat. We are also going to hear from the Chair, South Africa, and then we will hear remarks from the SADC PF Secretary General, after which Ms. Kelly Dambuza, our GBV Program Officer from the SADC Gender Unit, is also going to say something. And then we are going to go to the reason we are here, which is a presentation by the drafter, Ms. Eva Jala. And then we will come in with our discussion and interventions and comments on the model law that was sent to us all earlier. After the discussion, we are going to have the highlights of the discussion, which is going to be done by our rapporteur. And then we are going to conclude, and the meeting is expected to end at 5 o'clock. So without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Kanyana Kumede to the podium to give us her remarks. I thank you, Ms. Kumede, please.
Director of Ceremony, thank you very much. Chairperson of this meeting, Brigadier Lawrence Nkweng, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Ms. Woemo Sehuma, the Head of Regional Interpol Harare, Mr. Mobita Nawa, representatives of SADC member states are present here, our consultant, Ms. Eva Jala, colleagues from the SADC Secretariat, and colleagues from the Regional Bureau Harare and the SADC Parliamentary Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. A very good afternoon to you all. I have a simple role this afternoon, just to welcome you. And indeed, I feel greatly honored and very privileged to welcome you all at this virtual gathering, which forms a key step in the development of the gender-based violence model law. This is our first meeting after the just ended summit in August. I wish to start by recognizing the presence of the chairperson, Advocate Nkweng, and congratulate you and your country, the Republic of South Africa, for being the current chair of the organ. And chairperson, we wish your country the best. As the National Commissioner of the South African Police Service, General Kehla Sithole, takes the SARPCO driver's seat for the coming year. And we look forward to working with you and pledge to continue offering our usual support. In the same vein, I wish to recall and recognize the role that the Republic of Botswana has played. And please allow me to use this very same opportunity to express our sincere, heartfelt gratitude to the National Commissioner of the Republic of Botswana for chairing SARPCO and efficiently guiding our operations over the past year in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Allow me to also recognize the presence of the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Ms. Woemo Sehuma, who will address us this afternoon regarding the GBV model law. I also recognize the presence of the head of Interpol Regional Bureau Harare, Mr. Mobita Nawa. We appreciate your presence here today, and we also wish to thank you for your commitment in the fight against transnational organized crime. through efficiently coordinating SARPCO programs and meetings such as this one. And to our very important delegates, the SARPCO Legal Subcommittee members and the SARPCO Women's Network, and of course, GBV coordinators from all the member states present here. We're very grateful that you all took time out of your very busy schedules to attend this consultative meeting. Your contribution really matters to us. Distinguished delegates, GBV has and continues to affect all of us in one way or the other. As law enforcers and the first responders to GBV, in most cases, we have a very huge role to play towards fighting against this ill in our society. The starting point is what we are going to be doing here today, which is adding our voice to the law that we're going to be enforcing in the near future. There can never be an effective enforcement of the law without a properly drafted law. And I am glad we also have the representatives from the SARPCO Legal Subcommittee here today. Of importance is to note that the GBV model law we are going to discuss today will be used as a benchmark by all member states in developing or reviewing their domestic law on the same. I therefore urge all of us to take this consultative meeting with the seriousness it deserves. The model law was submitted to all member states well in advance, and I truly hope that you each went through it thoroughly so that you can be able to effectively contribute today. Let me also use this opportunity to thank the SADC Parliamentary Forum and the SADC Gender Unit for initiating this very important exercise and making the police SARPCO a part of it. Indeed, together we can. I look forward to your fruitful and constructive participation in this forum this afternoon. I thank you for your kind attention. And with this, I wish to invite Brigadier Mpeng for his opening remarks. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Good afternoon, sir. We can all hear you.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because we are struggling here with, our connectivity, but we are doing our best so that we can, deliver a good product. So let me just, take off from where my sister Tanyani left off. And then for the reasons I've already outlined, I've missed a chunk of what she said because of these productivity problems that we are facing. It is very interesting that we are discussing a very serious topic, that is the gender-based violence. And as you may know, that in South Africa, the month of August is, regarded as, the Women's Month. And I think I find it very befitting that I will be discussing this topic during the month of August. And then I have two of my colleagues who are also women who are joining from the legal subcommittee side. And then there is also a sister of mine who is dealing with gender-based violence-related matters. And then she's also a woman. And then and later, and then I feel very honored to be surrounded by these, wonderful women. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we continue on this topic of gender-based violence, what is important is for us to know exactly what is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is a general term that is used to capture violence that occurs as a result of the normative role, expectations associated with each gender, as well as the unequal power relationships between the genders within the context of a specific society. It is a fact that the primary targets of gender-based violence are women, and then mainly girl children. Even though we cannot say they are the only victims of gender-based violence, men can also be victims of gender-based violence. But it is a fact that the majority of the targets are women. And the most, commonly known, types of gender-based violence, we talk about domestic violence. And then you will find physical abuse. You'll find emotional abuse. You'll find economic abuse. And then there is also sexual violence. And then the most, a painful one is a question of femicide. Femicide is a situation where people are being killed, but those who profess to be loving them. It is actually the very same people who are expected to protect the victims, who are actually the perpetrators of this thing against the victims. If I can just mention, ladies and gentlemen, in the past 2 weeks in South Africa, we had a very serious and, a very heartbreaking incident of gender-based violence. There is a lady who was a law student at the University of Fort Hare in Cape Town. And then this lady was in the final stages of her law degree. And then the lady was killed by somebody she loved. And then the person chopped the lady's body and put it in a suitcase and then just go and dump it somewhere else. And then as the country was still reeling from that, and then we learned of a gentleman who came from jail and then who was released on parole. And then when he came back, and then he hanged a lady who was about 6 months pregnant. And then somewhere in the province of Limpopo, there is another body of a woman which was found hanging from a tree. And then the lady was also pregnant. And then these are very, very, very heartbreaking incidents. It is unforgivable for any person to kill another person. But for a person to kill a pregnant woman or a pregnant lady, really, that one is unforgivable. The trend in South Africa is that South African women experience high levels of gender-based violence. The recent incidents that I've already, highlighted, are some of the highlights. They are not the only incidents, there are others. And then one can ask a question: what are the root causes of gender-based violence? It is a very difficult question to answer, because of our gender violence does not originate from one factor. It is a combination of a lot of factors. Social and economic factors are involved, and which lead to gender-based violence. But what we can do is that the imbalances of power in gender inequality and the discriminatory, patriarchal practices against women are the root causes of gender-based violence. Some of the cultures, I'm not saying culture is wrong, but some of the cultures, they lead to the situation of gender-based violence. Some factors which influence gender-based violence are how we as individuals or as parents, we behave ourselves in our own homes. You'll find a situation, a domestic violence situation at home, where the father is assaulting the mother, where the father is actually starving the mother economically, emotionally draining this poor woman. And then we are raising children under those, circumstances. And then these children copy them. And then once they grow up, they are definitely going to do the very same thing which was perpetrated by the parents. Because of it is said that the kids don't learn by listening, kids learn by observing. Whatever that we do, and then our children are watching us. And then now we are having a very serious of this gender-based violence when it comes to the consequences thereof. The consequences of gender-based violence are not only physical, because it can lead to physical scars, and then it can lead to emotional scars. And then it is very difficult to solve or to heal emotional scars. And then it does not only end there, it is also wrecking the economics of the countries. Because of once there is a gender-based violence, and then the perpetrators must be hospitalized. The perpetrators must be taken for psycho therapy. The perpetrators must be put in places of shelter. And then all this cost governments a lot of money. People must be, put on medication and all these things. And then all these things are, they are having an effect on the economy of the country. And then also the days of absenteeism from work as a result of, people who suffered from gender-based violence. And then they lead to, the loss in production. And then the loss in production is going to lead to a less in revenue collection. And then less in revenue collection is definitely going to impact on the budget of the states. So it is very important, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm concluding today, that this is a very serious topic. This is a very serious scourge that is, engulfed the entire world. It is not only within the SADC region, but it is everywhere. Gender-based violence is a problem. And then we need to approach this thing with an open mind to say, we want to make a difference. We want to stop this scourge. We want people to understand that this is something that, is taking place within the homes. It is very difficult for the police to police gender-based violence because it is taking place within the confines of the home. It is taking place within people who are expected to be, loving one another, who are expected to be protecting one another. So in conclusion, I just want to say, I want to add my voice to what my sister has already said, Tanyani, that let us approach this thing and then with a broad-minded, and then let us approach this thing with the seriousness it deserves. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for those enlightening remarks.
Chair.
Yes,
Chair?
sir. Yes,
may I request ICT to allocate me English and French for interpreting? Thank you.
That is noted. ICT is going to assist. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to recognize the presence of Eswatini and Namibia in the House. You are very welcome to this consultation meeting. Next, remarks by the General Secretary of the SADC PF, Ms. Boemo Sahoma. Ma'am, you have the floor. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I have joined the ranks of the generals. I appreciate Director of Ceremonies, Ms. Barbara Mchenga. Allow me to recognize and appreciate the protocol that you have established by welcoming and recognizing Brigadier Lawrence Mokweng, the chairperson of the organ from the Republic of South Africa. Thank you for those illuminating remarks. Ms. Tayani Gumede, Senior Officer of Police, SARPCO, the SADC Secretariat. Allow me to recognize Dr. Joseph Piso, the head of Gender Unit at the SADC Secretariat. Allow me to also recognize Mr. Mobita Nawa, the head of Interpol, Regional Bureau, Harare. And also allow me to recognize the SARPCO Legal Subcommittee. This is a great inclusion in this particular meeting, and recognize all the various...
Eu preciso da tradução.
Host, kindly assist. There seems to be an interjection. Do we still have interpretation and translation?
Yes, we are in the Portuguese booth. Maybe the distinguished delegates would need guidance on how to access interpretation. Can you hear the English?
Thank you.
Can you hear the interpreter speaking? Thank you. We are interpreting into Portuguese booth.
Okay, thank you. Director of Ceremonies, may you kindly guide? I may do that for you quickly. Dear participants, when you go to the bottom of your screen, you will see several icons: mute, stop video, participants chats. There's one that is labeled interpretation. It's also circled differently. Kindly click on that icon, mute original video, and choose the language of your choice. This will allow you to hear only in the language that you prefer. I hope that will be helpful so that we may all hear each other. May I proceed?
Yes, ma'am, you may proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was just recognizing the various sectors represented here from the police in all your respective hierarchies. Allow me to recognize the members of the technical working group on the gender-based violence, model lawmaking, ably represented here, and Ms. Eva Jala, our well-regarded legal drafter of the SADC model law and GBV model law, and colleagues from parliaments and from the government machinery. It's my singular honor to welcome you to this stakeholder consultation organized under the auspices of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, with the distinguished collaboration of the SADC Secretariat and the Southern Africa Regional Police Chiefs Cooperation Organization. I wish to first of all acknowledge your presence today, as this demonstrates that there's consensus in the police force of the SADC member states on the need to address the daunting issue of gender-based violence. In the same vein, I wish to acknowledge the presence of those who work in dedicated GBV police units and who have worked hard over the years to deal with the GBV offenders and persisted by perseverance and temerity. Today, we gather here with a common agreement that there is room for improvement in the respective gender-based violence frameworks of SADC member states. And the SADC model law on gender-based violence is thus designed to be a surgical instrument to eradicate GBV in all its forms at national level. I'm confident that your interventions today will serve to polish and finalize the model law, particularly on the enforcement aspects, such that SADC model law becomes a useful benchmark for the incorporation by national parliaments. Ladies and gentlemen, the police force of every SADC member state represent a quintessential component in the fight against gender-based violence. Without the police force, there can be no investigation and prosecution of crime. More and more, gender-based violence is considered as a misdemeanor or a crime across the SADC region, as we have heard earlier from our brigadier. That offenders need to be punished through the criminal justice system after being apprehended by the police. Furthermore, the police force is central to sensitization campaigns on GBV and to the operations of hotlines that allow GBV to be swiftly reported. The police also stand in the front line in giving assistance to victims of gender-based violence and routing them to the appropriate institutions, such as shelters, foster care institutions, or the Ombudsperson's office, among others. And this has also been underscored earlier. In addition, the police can be actively involved in the enforcement of court orders and ensure that protection orders or occupation orders for victims are respected. Last but not least, representatives of the police force are often involved in the rehabilitation of gender-based violence offenders and ensure that they did not reoffend. In this respect, the participation of the police and the views of the police representatives are thus central to parliamentary deliberations that will lead to the finalization of the SADC model law on gender-based violence. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm proud to be rendering these opening remarks side by side with SARPCO delegates, which is also a cooperative institution between SADC countries in Southern Africa. This shows that different institutions can join together and team up efforts on a noble cause for the greater good of the region. Although the police force forms part of the executive of the SADC member states, and is that distinct from Parliament, it is crucial for views to be shared at the preparation stage of this model law. As after all, it is the police that will be administering the domestic policing legislation that deals with gender-based violence. In this regard, I wish to emphasize to you as our audience today that the initiative of the SADC model law on GBV is an extrapolation of the SADC Parliamentary Forum Strategic Plan of 2019 to 2023. At the heart of the Forum Strategic Plan is the need to promote gender equality, equality of treatment, and non-discrimination for all SADC citizens. Since the strategic plan of the Forum upholds the preservation of a culture of human rights as a high-ranking priority, the development of the SADC model law on GBV is that a step in the right direction. Once the SADC model law on GBV will be adopted by the SADC Parliamentary Forum Plenary Assembly, it will add to the robust Bill of Rights, which has already been developed by the Forum in the form of SADC model laws. For instance, on HIV and AIDS, we have a model law on eradicating child marriage and protecting children already in marriage. We have a SADC model law on elections. We are currently developing a SADC model law on public financial management, and this one that we are meeting on, which is the SADC model law on GBV. This model law will thus constitute a valuable addition to the existing model laws, and will complement them to afford better protection to women, young girls of the SADC region, without the exclusion of men and boys. The SADC model law on GBV is also the result of the snowball effect of previous forum initiatives, such as the first ever Women's Parliament held in Mahé in 2017, the Gender Responsive Oversight Model, which is called the GROM, a gender-based budgeting in national parliaments. The SADC model on GBV now constitutes the zenith of the forum's fight against GBV in collaboration with SADC national parliaments. Ladies and gentlemen, being police representatives from your respective member states, you'll concur with me that GBV is a matter which cuts across criminal and civil law, as well as administrative law. For GBV to be eradicated, there is a need for a mix of remedies and enforcement mechanisms that are conducive for a swift and efficient intervention by the authorities. So far, all SADC member states certainly have anti-GBV measures put in place by law or otherwise, but none of them provide a comprehensive GBV framework that captures the different scenarios in which victims of GBV may find themselves in. I'm sure you'll relate to the situation where GBV is exerted through social media, the internet or mobile applications, and there's sometimes little protection against such threats. You will relate to the situation where victims arrive at the police station, but then hesitate to make GBV-related complaints against family members, at the risk of ruining their family life altogether. These are the new challenges and gaps that need to be urgently addressed. And it is in this perspective that the Forum has been quick to proceed with the development of the GBV model law. In addition, there's no denying that COVID-19 has led to a spike of GBV cases within the households. With GBV becoming one of the most notorious crimes to be reported in the last 2 years, it is also generally accepted that GBV also leads to other social predicaments which have stark human rights implications, such as HIV infection, early and unintended pregnancies, child marriages, among others. The development of the SADC model on GBV was thus necessary to plug the existing gaps and improve the safety and security of SADC citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to highlight that the SADC model law on GBV is in accordance with the SADC regional strategy and framework of action for addressing GBV, which is already at the implementation stage under the SADC organs. As you may be aware, the regional strategy calls for human rights compliant legislation. It also outlaws negative traditional and social, economic, and political practices that promote GBV. This actually tallies with the gender-related objective under the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, the Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality, the Beijing, as well as Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 on progressive women and youth empowerment. The GBV thus marks the GBV model law thus marks the constructive consolidation of regional and national efforts made both by the executive and the SADC member parliaments. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that many of you here today will be already acquainted with the lawmaking process of your respective member states. While laws enacted by Parliament usually have immediate legal effect, laws at regional level or international level are mostly inspirational and need to be domesticated to have legal effect. From this angle, although the SADC model law on GBV would constitute soft law, it will nonetheless be a powerful motivational tool for member parliaments to enact robust GBV legislation based on the normative standards prescribed in the model law. Our experience at the forum has demonstrated that model laws have the potential to boost parliamentary activity or policy-making activity on a particular theme and accelerate the legislative process. This approach is furthermore subservient, and I underline, to the principle of sovereignty of member states, as the latter have the leeway to adopt the model law to benefit the local context. Dear colleagues and distinguished participants, I wish to end by emphasizing that stakeholder consultation is a fundamental aspect of every model law. The police represent the enforcement arm of the state and is thus a stakeholder which has hands-on and practical experience on gender-based violence. This consultation follows a series of other consultations where the forum has engaged human rights commissioners, judges, lawyers, jurists, as well as members of the civil society, youth, and recently, or this morning, let me say, the SADC gender ministry machinery. This engagement with police representatives is thus an addition that will bring earnest value to the model law and will make it a premium achievement. In this respect, I encourage you to interact openly and frankly with the legal drafter and other presenters today. You're also welcome to send comments to the SADC Secretariat, the legal drafter, or the SADC Parliamentary Forum no later than the 10th of September 2021. On this note, I wish to thank you again for your attendance today and wish you all an informative and pleasant exchange during this session. I thank you for your kind listening.
Thank you very much, SG, for those remarks highlighting the role of the police in gender-based violence-related issues, as well as bringing the meeting into perspective as to what is expected of us today, as well as what we should expect from our consultant drafter, Ms. Jala. Before I invite Ms. Jala, I would like to invite Ms. Kelly Dambuza to give us a presentation on the challenges to effective response to GBV in SADC this afternoon. Ms. Kelly, you have the floor. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and good afternoon to all of you. All protocol is observed, and I will just be very brief because some of the challenges have also been highlighted by the Secretary General through that statement. Let me just quickly, in 5 minutes, and just highlight some of the challenges that I have here on the presentation. So let me just share the presentation with all of you. Okay. I will be very, very brief to just highlight some of the challenges that some research in the SADC region have highlighted with regards to effective response to gender-based violence. I believe it has been indicated that gender-based violence is a violation of human rights. We all are aware of that, and recognizing violence, gender-based violence as a violation of human rights, it makes it very clear the binding obligations of states to prevent, to eradicate, and to punish acts of such violence. It's also one issue that is most complex in our society. It affects victims psychologically, physically, sexually, and economically. The colleague from the police, South Africa, they have elaborated on that a bit more. And just to indicate that we also find that gender-based violence is very common in our region, and though the prevalence rates vary significantly across member states. At the same time, we find that many of the SADC countries, or almost all member states, have legislation to address gender-based violence. Whether it's general legislation or they're addressing the specific forms of gender-based violence. However, despite these efforts, we note that gender-based violence remains a significant problem in our region, with new forms continuing to emerge. This slide just highlights the commitments by SADC. We're looking at the revised SADC protocol on gender and development. In particular, articles 20 to 25 of this protocol. It calls for state parties to enact and enforce legislation prohibiting all forms of violence. We also have the SADC strategy and framework of action on addressing gender-based violence, 2018 to 2030. It's an instrument that is supporting the implementation of the SADC protocol on gender and development, with a particular focus on gender-based violence. So let me highlight some of the challenges that I have documented here. As indicated earlier, these are informed by the SADC comprehensive study on gender-based violence that was conducted and publicized in 2018. And also the SADC strategy on gender-based violence itself also highlights some of these challenges that one way or the other, they continue to also show us how important it is for us to have such a model law in our region to guide and to address some of the challenges that I will read out here. The first challenge that I know most member states worry about is the issue of inadequate knowledge of gender-based violence at all levels. What is important here is that we need to know that if the communities are not aware of what gender-based violence is, if they don't have comprehensive understanding, if the service providers are not aware of what gender-based violence is, this in itself, it limits our communities from claiming their rights and reporting accordingly where there is need. So there is need to improve in that area. There is also limited knowledge on available legislation on gender-based violence within our communities. In some cases, there are some service providers that have also been shown to have limited knowledge in terms of what the law says on gender-based violence. And in some cases, again, where this law is known on gender-based violence at national level, we find that there is inadequate interpretation and application of the law. Again, there is also limited guidance regarding application of the law in most member states with regards to issues like regulations. And then we also find that another challenge common across the member states is the issue of withdrawal of gender-based violence cases, and also the prolonged period for GBV cases in court. It's also something that member states raise as an issue of concern. Under-reporting of gender-based violence or low levels of reporting is also another concern in the region. Prosecution rates have also been identified as low in the SADC region. And also there is a challenge with regards to monitoring and evaluation, the implementation of our laws and our action plans and policies on gender-based violence. We have these laws, we have these national action plans and strategies, but there is not much effort that is put towards making sure that we track and look at how stakeholders are implementing such laws to see if there is progress and if the laws and even these policies are serving GBV courts, and also the lack of capacity by courts to effectively deal with cases of gender-based violence. Member states have highlighted this capacity in different areas, including just the understanding of what gender-based violence is and the implications of this act, including also the issue of high cases at the courts, which do not really allow for effective engagement on issues of GBV accordingly. Also, we find that in our region, places of safety or shelters for victims of violence are in acute shortage. We find that in most cases, a few of these shelters are run by civil society organizations. Some of the challenges include lack of consistent GBV prevention programs. We know that is a very important aspect when we are talking to reducing issues of GBV in our region. If prevention efforts are weak or they're not consistent or sustained, it means we will continue to have this problem. Also, there is an issue regarding alignment of our prevention and response initiatives to the laws and policies that we have in place. The laws and policies will be very comprehensive and adequate, but what you see happening on the ground in terms of implementation, it's very different. It's not as per the laws and policies at country level. There is also an issue around weak coordination mechanisms between the different service providers and stakeholders. There is also weak or insufficiently defined GBV referral systems. If you know, we know that in our region, and just like in other regions, most of the GBV services are not provided under one roof. It's only in isolated situations. But in most cases, delivery points, service delivery points are spread all over, which therefore in itself necessitates that there be clear referral systems, across the different service providers. There has also been a challenge in terms of limited programs to support the rehabilitation and integration of GBV perpetrators into the community. That in itself has also contributed to issues of reoffending. And we also note also that there are also not adequate strategies and initiatives to address the social and cultural practices that perpetuate gender-based violence. These harmful cultural practices and social and some of the norms. I think the colleague from Police South Africa, they have highlighted this, that it's important that we look at, what are the aspects of our cultures that are harmful and are perpetuating gender-based violence. We need to address them accordingly. The other issue has been the limited data and information on gender-based violence, which continues, which means that it means therefore that the policies and the programs are really not informed by the information, by the data accordingly. For you to design effective prevention and response programs, information should be there to indicate what the status of things are in terms of gender-based violence. There has also been an issue regarding limited funding for prevention of gender-based violence. I'm highlighting this issue so that you also understand how the model law comes in to try and address such issues and provide more guidance to member states in this regard. We also recently, as the SADC Secretariat, did an exercise to review GBV legislation in the SADC region, looking at how member states are implementing the commitments they have made on international some of these international instruments, human rights related. And it's very clear that member states in SADC, some of them have not fully domesticated the gender-based violence related provisions from some of these international human rights related instruments. And we find that in some countries, the laws that are related to the elimination of gender-based violence are not harmonized accordingly. There are inconsistencies that are noted across laws at national level. And we also note from this review that 5 out of 16 SADC member states, they explicitly provide for the equality of men and women in their constitutions. And only 6 out of 16 member states, they do not recognize marital rape as an offense. And therefore, they do not legislate against it accordingly. 10 out of 16 SADC countries, we find that they allow child marriages if consent from parents is obtained, and this is also opening room for abuse of children. And we also note that most countries in SADC, they have provision for sexual harassment in the workplace. However, they disregard other spheres of life. There's greater focus on sexual harassment only in the workplace. Lastly, but not least, is to note that we find that also some member states, they emphasize more on payment of fines for crimes of sexual assault, and they place less emphasis on stiff prison terms or penalties accordingly. So that is just to highlight some of the challenges that we have noted in the region through the different exercises that we have engaged through with member states. And just to encourage you all, as it has been mentioned by the previous speakers, that may we engage accordingly in this meeting today and share our experiences so that they inform the development of a model law for our region that will be very responsive to issues as they pertain in this region. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I can stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly, for those highlights on the challenges that are there in the effective response to GBV. There are quite a handful, but we are optimistic that the model law is going to address some of those challenges. There's a comment from Eswatini in the chat. They are requesting for the presentations that are going to be made at this meeting. I hope they're going to be addressed before the end of the meeting. Now we go to the climax of the day. We are now going to hear from Ms. Eva Jala, who is the legal drafter of the SADC model law that we are discussing today. Ms. Jala, you have the floor. I thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Welcome to our meeting today on the GBV model law. Let me just begin by saying, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, all protocols observed, as was outlined by the two previous speakers. I'm glad to be presenting this model law to you, and I want to take on a different format so that we allow debate by our colleagues who are well versed in this area of the law. Let me begin by merely stating and emphasizing to our dear police officers that the GBV model law is a comprehensive tool to assist member states, as the SG has already pointed out, to enact profound and efficacious laws on GBV. It was sad to hear the experiences, the cases that are coming out in South Africa. These are very, very serious. They're touching, as the chairman has said, and it goes to the very core of our existence as women. So in developing the GBV model law, we have taken into account various international treaties, agreements, protocols, plans of action, agendas, and so forth, so that we actually come up with a very comprehensive instrument to deal with this scourge. We have in the preamble, I'm sure all of you have read the model law, because I know you have taken it very seriously, so I don't want to waste too much time going into explanatory notes, but solely to say that the preamble explains a lot about the instruments, international instruments, regional instruments that impact on the model law and its content in relation to fighting GBV. In the process of developing the model law, we have taken into account the UN and SADC tools, guidelines and principles relating to GBV, propositions and recommendations, and also to the responsibilities and protection of the role players in the criminal justice system. So you'll see that the model law looks at all aspects of the criminal justice process and ensures that at each stage of the process, justice is being done to the victim. As the chairman also stated, we have to look closely at the customs, traditions, legal rules, and concepts related to or impacting on GBV, so that we effectively are able to prosecute and convict GBV cases. We should not have any obstacles in relation to such prosecutions. We've heard from Kelly all the challenges that exist in relation to actually handling and managing GBV cases. And I don't want to repeat those, so that we give enough time to you to be able to discuss the GBV model law comprehensively. I wish to point out the fact that we have taken a human rights-based approach in dealing with the issue of GBV. As you know, this is a human rights issue, a very profound aspect of a person's human rights and fundamental freedoms, which we cannot ignore. In this respect, we have restated some pertinent human rights requirements that generally or specifically impact on GBV. We have also included a number of policy issues with respect to the operationalization of these human rights propositions. So I want, as I say, to take a different approach, to go directly to the issues that will most affect you as police officers in your quest to deal with this scourge called GBV. So I've taken it that you've read the explanatory notes, you've read thoroughly the substantive parts of the GBV model law, so I won't go into them. I want to touch especially on 3 parts, which is access to justice, the part dealing with prohibitions, and the part dealing with response to GBV, because these are the most important in your work as prosecutors and police officers. Firstly, let me point out one of the crucial provisions which deal with extraterritorial jurisdiction of national laws. And I'm glad Mr. Muvita is around, and he'll help us a lot on these issues relating to extraterritorial, because it's very difficult to find a commonality of approach to defeat GBV, which cuts across all our borders, if we do not spend time in discussing extraterritorial application of the laws, because people will just jump borders and get away with the crime. So the border law actually states that a member state must ensure that any law on gender-based violence shall have extraterritorial effect so as to meaningfully give effect to certain obligations and commitments made by member states under international instruments relating to gender-based violence. The law, let me make it bigger so everyone can see it. The law shall apply to any offense committed outside the territory of the member state when the offense is committed by a national of another member state, by a stateless person who has his or her habitual residence in a member state at the time of the commission of the offense, or against a victim who is a national of a member state. What are the objectives of the model law? I think this is key so that we understand the extent of the model law. The objectives of the model law are to provide sets of concepts, principles, standards, measures, and interventions to assist member states to develop policies that support the enactment of efficacious and comprehensive national laws on gender-based violence. For example, provide prohibitions with respect to gender-based violence, access to justice provisions, procedural fairness, measures, strategies, and interventions in key areas relating to gender-based violence without usurping the powers of national legislatures or national executives to initiate and enact national laws in their areas of competence and jurisdictions. The SG actually emphasized this, and this is a point to take on, that the model law is mere a tool, a yardstick to help member states come up with more efficacious legislation. You heard from Kelly that there's numerous challenges in our laws today. There are so many lacuna. There are so many inconsistency and disharmony in our laws that it becomes very, very difficult for police to handle, investigate, and prosecute GBV cases. So in this model law, we have tried to make the process more user-friendly for both the law enforcement officers and the victims. And that's what I want us to concentrate on this afternoon. It also provides for legal rights, secure legal protection, and legal recourse for victims. So you'll see under the access of justice provisions, we provide for restraining orders, we provide for restitution orders, we provide for preventative measures and so forth, so that the victim has some legal rights and protections in the course of the criminal justice procedures. Let me look at certain core issues relating to interpretation for purposes of your knowledge to see to what extent will this GBV law go in trying to define who a victim is. So we define a victim as meaning a person who has been subject to gender-based violence or discrimination, and who individually or collectively has suffered harm, including physical or mental injury, emotional suffering, economic loss, or substantial impairment of their fundamental rights through acts or omissions that are in violation of criminal laws, proscribing abuse of power, employment laws, or gender equity and equality laws in force in a member state, including a survivor, meaning the word survivor shall be construed accordingly, meaning it will be construed as the meaning of victim. And I'm glad when I was listening to the opening speech of the chairman, he actually touched on these components of GBV. So we are all talking on the same page. Again, we have put in a provision which expands the definition of gender-based violence so that we leave no room for misinterpretation. So we have stated that gender-based violence will include the following: domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, including sexual assault and sexual harassment, harmful practices, including early marriage, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, female infanticide, prenatal sex selection, virginity testing, HIV/AIDS cleansing, honor crimes, acid attacks, crimes committed in relation to bride price and dowry, maltreatment of widows, forced pregnancy, and trying women for sorcery or witchcraft, femicide, trafficking, and sexual slavery. So you can see the extent of the definition of gender-based violence. It's not only concentrated on issues of assault, battery, and things like that. It goes much, much further. And that is important that we take note of that definition. And then we also go further for purposes of the definition of victim to expand the meaning of this. And we have said that a person who has been subjected to gender-based violence or discrimination shall be a victim, regardless of whether the perpetrator is identified, apprehended, prosecuted, or convicted, or there is a familial relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. And where appropriate, includes the immediate family or dependents of the victim and persons who have suffered harm in intervening or assisting the victim or in trying to prevent victimization. So you can find at any one point, you will have 3 cases coming before you as law enforcement officers: the victim himself, a friend who was trying to intervene, or a family member who has been victimized to trying to prevent gender-based violence. So let me go straight now to the various parts which are of essence to your work as law enforcement officer. I won't dwell too much on part 3 because your training as law enforcement officers includes human rights, Suffice it to say that we have taken a human rights-based approach to coming up with these GBV provisions. You'll find that the model law ensures that effective domestication is achieved and major provisions in regional and international instruments are incorporated on gender equity, equality, and violence. Some human rights are restated to achieve a human rights-based approach to effectively deal with GBV as committed to by member states under various human rights instruments. The following are indicative of some of the rights that are restated in the GBV model law. So you can see I've just provided you with a long list of the types of human rights that we have restated. In restating these human rights, we've made it easier to comprehend, and we have attached against each human right the policy direction that we want ministries to take when developing action points, preventative measures, protective measures to fulfill the human rights of a victim. We are further in this part actually pointed out specific international agreements that actually deal with gender-based violence. And I think for you as law enforcement officers, I would encourage that you get copies of these very important documents and acquaint yourselves with their content, because it will greatly help your work and your approach to handling GBV cases. So you can see there are quite a number of them. Some of them are older ones, which you'll be very familiar with, like, for example, the Convention Against Torture and other human and degrading treatment or punishment, and so forth. But there are relatively new ones, like the United Nations Palermo Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And the most recent one, if you want to call it that, is the Maputo Declaration, which deals with human rights of women and children, and especially touches on gender-based violence quite a lot. It is important that when we're looking at gender-based violence, we emphasize the issue of the violence itself. So in the human rights-based approach, we have actually looked at what are these protections that are required in relation to gender-based violence. And we've basically listed them there for your purposes. The first one is a person shall not be subjected to any form of gender-based violence, including being sold, enslaved, trafficked, or abducted by any person. A woman and a child shall not be subjected to any form of gender-based violence generally. So you go back to the definition of gender-based violence to fulfill this particular human rights approach, restatement of the rights. Women have the right to refuse sexual acts, including acts within marriage and relationships. These are no longer a domestic affair, as we used to be. No, that's domestic. Please go and sort it out. No, it's now a national issue and must be dealt with at the national level with a seriousness that it deserves. So including acts within marriage and relationships that put the woman at risk of infection, such as HIV or other sexually transmitted infection, and have the right to refuse any act not desirable by her. She doesn't want. A no is a no. A no is not a yes. And such refusal shall not be a ground for divorce. Marriage, cohabitation, or a romantic or intimate relationship shall not constitute a defense to a charge of marital rape or any other form of gender-based violence. So you can see there's a clear prohibition with this respect. Just because you are married or you are in intimate relationship does not give the other person a right to abuse you. No right, and you can't use it as a defense. So let me now turn to a very important issue that directly concerns yourself, which is access to justice. I want you to open your GBV model laws on that part, because we'll be looking at some other provisions which may not be in my presentation. My presentation covers the general aspects relating to access to justice and procedural protections. So when we look at this list, which is quite lengthy, we may have to look at one or two other provisions in the model law which directly affects your work as law enforcement officers. So let us look at this very comprehensive list just to put you on track as to what we are trying to aim at in the GBV model law. So the first is that a victim has a right to access justice in the manner stipulated in part 3 of the model law. So you turn to model part 3 and you'll see what we're talking about. The GBV model law mainly incorporates the requirements as stipulated in some of your own laws as member states. We studied these laws and we removed all the best practices and the effective provisions that we know will help you identify with the GBV model law. So we've incorporated those provisions. We've also incorporated provisions contained in international, regional, and continental instruments, and recommendations were made and the recommendations made in research documents written by protagonists, meaning leaders in this field of criminal justice. Further, this part incorporates throughout the entire proceedings the rights of victims. The following are notable. They are notable. So let us go through them because I think they are very important to your work as law enforcement officers. The right to reasonable, accurate, and timely notice of any judicial institution, proceeding, or parole proceeding involving the crime of GBV, or any release or escape of an accused. So where you release an accused or the accused has escaped, the victim has a right to be notified. The culture of keeping quiet, leaving the poor victim to wonder what's happening to my case, that should be a thing of the past. Let us leave it in history. Let us be more responsive to a victim of this atrocious crime. The victim's right to be informed of their rights, remedies, and victim support services, and on how to obtain them, in addition to information about their role and opportunities to participate in judicial and approach. You know, as law enforcement is your police station. So all the rights of the victims should be on your fingertips. And the victim, the right to seek restitution, during the dictation of provisions to ensure and the family and victim protection programs. This process is very weak, not all the time. Respect. Measures to CCTV and support persons are all included, including helpless persons and persons who don't keep returning persons their victimization. The extent of these persons belong, they must be attended to. The right to speak to a female officer where possible, where claims of self-defense in investigations, self-defense. That's why all over the place, I was so provoked that you've committed murder, come and eat more humane approach, life being at stake. Outmoded cautionary rule. You all know the drawing of inference between women and other law enforcement officers couched these provisions to dated modes of officers. The following are civil and criminal proceedings, stalking and exploitation by the proceedings in accordance with the principles of national criminal law. These must not be excluded intentionally that happened today. Let us see whether there's been a pattern of abuse so that we can deal with the case in a manner that it deserves to be dealt with. We've also provided in the model law for legal defenses such as honor or provocation, which cannot be invoked by perpetrators of violence against women to escape criminal responsibility in GBV cases. Some of these, they will tell you, is part of our religion, like mainly in the Indians. They like to use this as a defense. It's part of their religion. Or you use defenses which emanate from customary law, which do nothing to protect a woman against this vice. So such defenses should not be permitted to ensure that the perpetrator actually escapes criminal responsibility. And we rely a lot on the law enforcement officers to assess these issues and prosecute them to the extent possible. People who perpetrate acts of violence against women and children while voluntarily under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or other substances must not be exempted from criminal responsibility. The law includes prohibitions, prohibits any law responses, avoid mediation that could harm the victim. Sometimes you return the victim and said, go to your family, let them mediate and resolve this case internally within the family. You find a lot of law enforcement officers advise the victim to do this. Is that in the best interest of the victim? Is the question to ask. So the assessment should not harm the victim. I think we've got an interference. Can we mute? I think it's Mama's. So who's I think she's not muted. The law also prohibits discrimination based on nationality or lack thereof, refugee or asylum seeking status. There is prohibits any adverse.
Apologies, Mama Sidiso. Mama Sidiso, kindly mute.
Thank you, thank you. The law also prohibits any adverse inferences if GBV cases are reported late, and there should be no offense or false accusation, because this is very common in assessing and investigating GBV cases. Sentences imposed should match the gravity of GBV crime. So this is in relation to the judiciary, but it's also how the case has been presented. So when prosecuting the case, we should try as much ensure that the facts of the case, the gravity of the offense actually are clearly coming out so that we've got a just sentence being imposed. Judicial and quasi-judicial proceedings should not be a bar to civil proceedings being initiated against the perpetrator or anyone who acted negligently. Pre, during, and post-requirement procedures and processes for and relating to GBV cases are clearly outlined, such as the following: how to inform and the extent of information to be given to a victim, the victim's rights, and any basic support which may be available to assist the victim are thoroughly dealt with in the GBV model law. We also deal thoroughly with obtaining for the victim or advising the victim on how to obtain shelter, medical treatment, legal services, counseling, or other services that may be required in the circumstances. Again, law enforcement officers are the first point of call. So it is your duty to try to advise the victim on stages in the criminal justice process, or indeed on the services and amenities available to the victim in order to prevent further victimization or further assault by a perpetrator. Advising the victim of the victim's right to lodge a complaint and where the complaint may be best lodged for expeditious handling. If you feel that the GBV victim is better off being dealt with by the Human Rights Commission, for example, or by a women's clinic or the victim support units, then direct the victim there, away from the police station where you are dealing with generalized crimes, so that they can have effective justice and quick justice from the beginning of the criminal justice process. So a number of other issues are actually provided for in the model law, such as informing the victim of remedies available, protection of the victim during legal proceedings, nature and extent of evidence to be presented in legal proceedings, protection of witnesses, special needs of women and children, restraining and protection orders, and re-victimization provisions, provision of legal aid, reintegration and social support to victims, and the use of mutual legal assistance in criminal matters and extradition. As you all know, as law enforcement officers, especially countries who are part of the Commonwealth, we've all agreed on similar legislation dealing with mutual legal assistance in criminal matters and extradition. So it's much, much easier for us in the region to actually extradite and deal with the cases, because even information is freely shared under the Commonwealth schemes, which are now legislation that apply across Commonwealth countries. So this is very helpful, since the law actually deals, extends extraterritorial from our own jurisdictions. So that is access to justice. Let us go again quickly before we start asking questions and debating these issues to effective responses. I think this is also part of your work as law enforcement officers. So the GBV model law sets out provisions which stimulate a quick and effective response to GBV, whether it takes place in the home, public place, public or private institution, or place of employment, thus addressing acts of gender-based violence that are about to take place or have already taken place. The GBV model law ensures that when GBV occurs, how it is reported, assessed, investigated, duly prosecuted, and decisions made and executed are done timely and expeditiously, and that the rights of the complainant victim are observed and respected at all times and for all, irrespective of status and documentation. The GBV model law includes the following: efficient and simplified procedures and processes for handling reports of GBV and internal complaints at places of work or other public and private institutions with regard to reporting, receiving, assessing, investigating, determining, and appealing a GBV report or complaint without reprisal, The process for referring and lodging a GBV report or complaint to an appropriate authority, such as the police, victim support unit, human resource department, or human resource person dealing with the GBV, or other appropriate authority, or person or statutory body or ministerial department dealing specifically with gender matters, children, or women's affairs. We all know that in our SADC countries, we don't have single regulators dealing with GBV. We have a fragmentation of various departments, police units, GBV units, statutory bodies, ministries per se dealing with gender equity, human rights commissions. We have the defender or the public defender of the rights of persons at places of work and so forth. Dealing with the GBV, it's very fragmented, but the way we coordinate, consult, and collaborate in fighting GBV is what is most important. So we actually deal with, if you receive a report, how do you refer it? Where do you lodge it? And to whom do you lodge it? So that immediate steps are taken to push that report into the criminal justice system. We also deal with the procedures for requests and submission of information, release and dissemination of information on GBV. And this is very important amongst the various institutions dealing with GBV. Collaboration on investigations and assessments of GBV reports or complaints with and among appropriate authorities. So there's some notable provisions which we can look at, and these deal with simplified procedures and processes for effective response and referral. So this is a specific provision in the GBV law, model law, and it states that a competent authority shall put in place effective procedures providing for efficient and simplified procedures and process for handling investigations, assessments, and complaints relating to gender-based violence, such as reporting, receiving, assessing, investigating, determining, and appealing a gender-based complaint or report without reprisals, providing for simpler procedures for seeking medical treatment for victims of gender-based violence without need of a police report or other official reference. You find many a time in most of our member states, when you go and report a GBV case, the first reaction of the police is, can I have your medical treatment report? Before I even take it up as a GBV case. It's very unfair. Why are you delaying the matter? Why not receive the report, put in your occurrence book what has happened, take the statements, and thereafter the victim can actually go in and put a report? Or why not receive a medical report later on from, if the victim is in hospital, a family member can bring it in, can lodge the report. So we are seeking of ways where quickly the law enforcement officers can actually start investigating the report before evidence is made. For referring and lodging a gender-based violence complaint or report to an appropriate authority, such as the police or other law enforcement officer, victim support unit, statutory body, etc., especially in relation to issues relating to women and children. For requesting and submitting information on gender-based violence, and for collaborating on investigation and assessments on gender-based violence cases with other relevant authorities. So all law enforcement officers, other appropriate authorities, and judicial officers shall, and this we have made mandatory in the model law, and hopefully that member states can also make them mandatory in national laws, develop fast-track procedures that can identify cases involving gender-based violence and prioritize them in court dockets, including bail hearings, committal hearings, and trial. In cases of victims who are children, trials shall take place as soon as practicable, unless delays are in the child's best interest. In civil or administrative matters, to ensure timeliness of procedures, to ensure timely pre-trial processes and trials, fast tracking of cases involving gender-based violence against women, and prioritizing cases in court documents. So all law enforcement officers, other appropriate authorities, and judicial officers must ensure the application of fair burden and evidentiarity standards, completion of all basic evidence collection before any decisions are made about a case of gender-based violence. There is a clear and complete statement from the victim as much as possible. Review all other evidence leading to or connected with the act of gender-based violence reported. Reduce delay at all stages of the decision-making process in the prosecution of gender-based violence offenses. Limit the number of case continuances or adjournments, and allow only reasonable delays, taking into account the impact on the victim in civil, family, or administrative matters. All law enforcement officers, other appropriate authorities, and judicial officers must ensure, as the case may be, the coordination of all key officers and service providers, such as the arresting police officer, healthcare providers, child prohibition officers, anti-gender-based violence monitoring officers, and welfare officers. Attendance of critical witnesses, victims, and perpetrators are located and served with notices to attend court. That statements, analysis, and evidence is collected, compiled, and is available for judicial and quasi-judicial proceedings, and any additional statements required are secured. That officers are competent to present evidence in court in an ethical, objective, and professional manner. Please, you don't have to keep sending the junior prosecutors to do this. I think this matter deserves high-level representation in court because of its very nature and the consequences which may pertain thereto. Evidence building is promoted to achieve credibility of the allegations rather than on the credibility of victim or complaint. Concentrate on getting credible allegations and not just look at, is this victim credible? Is what they are putting forward credible enough? So don't judge the victim. Look at the evidence and build the evidence in order to help the victim. That the victim has access to entitlements and rights provided in this law and is familiar with the geography of the judicial or quasi-judicial premises and appropriately facilitated with all preparations and services such as transport. We all know that some of these victims, especially those coming maybe from the compounds, coming from the rural areas, are really mystified with the court process. The court building itself terrifies them. Some of them have never entered a court building, so they don't know what to expect. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to say. So we are saying it's the duty of a law enforcement officer as the first point of call to familiarize this poor victim, to facilitate, to comfort and bring her down, so that she can give her evidence in circumstances that are not too mystified, that are friendly, that are conducive for her to tell her story. She must not be stifled. She must be enabled to tell her story. That's why we are asking you as officers of first point of entry, first point of stop, to actually help the victim. So that is responsive provision dealing with. Please, there's so many other provisions which I urge you to look at in your time. Then the next one, the final one where I really want to concentrate on is part 6, dealing with prohibitions, offenses, and sentencing. We all heard the challenges relating to our statute books. We've got a lot of challenges, lacunas, inconsistencies, disharmony, and so many other things, ambiguity in the way law is presented in relation to GBV, which makes your work as law enforcement officers very difficult because you can only act within the law. So if the law does not help you to act fairly, or ensure access to justice is achieved, who can blame you? We blame the law. We blame the crafters of the law, which have made it so difficult for the victim to access justice. So the GBV model law puts emphasis on the need by member states to take the requisite legislative measures to prohibit GBV in as clear language as is possible. The aim is to ensure that effective communication is given to the user and not to be misunderstood or not to be misinterpreted. So we need efficacious laws to deal with this, to provide adequate offenses on GBV and supportive measures or restraints to assist effective charging and prosecution of a GBV offense, such as forbidding all forms of GBV criminality and creating specific GBV offenses, doing cross-references, effective cross-references to other offenses created under other related laws, such as trafficking, terrorism, corruption, cyber crimes, and all those issues. We need to ensure that if you are dealing with a standalone GBV act, then it's properly cross-referenced to all the components relevant in relation to fighting GBV and providing appropriate penalties while ensuring sentencing policies are well streamlined to ensure deterrence. Some countries don't have sentencing policies, so it becomes very difficult even for law enforcement officers to ensure that they actually follow the elements, the criteria on providing guidance as to the nature of a sentence to be provided for specific penalty. So support measures or restraints must be built into the provisions on prohibitions, such as there should not be any adverse inferences if GBV cases are reported late. There should be no offense of false accusation. There should be protection of the victim during legal proceedings. Sentences imposed should match gravity of the GBV offenses without exceptions and reductions, and no mitigatory reasons or extenuating circumstances should be allowed. Sometimes we dwell too much on what the perpetrator is trying to mitigate. And we are looking at certain extenuating circumstances in order to let the perpetrator go free. The mere fact that he's head of the household does not diminish the harm that this person has committed on this victim, which harm may last a lifetime. So we have to be very careful in how we go ahead in prosecuting and assessing and handling these cases of GBV. So some notable provisions in this respect. We have created prohibition on gender-based violence. We have also dealt with collusion in gender-based violence offenses, which is important. One of the such provisions says, any person who colludes with another person in commission of a gender-based violence offense by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, or position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person, or not to investigate or prosecute a gender-based violence complaint or report, commits an offense and shall be liable on conviction to imprisonment for a period not exceeding blah, blah, blah. We have to take drastic measures in this respect because of the dominant factor. You find a lot of women are subordinated to the male gender. And the male gender can do anything not to be prosecuted, especially where these people are rich. They've got money. They can bribe you. They can give you certain promises that will make you not prosecute and so forth, which again, it's very sad because it goes against the very fiber of Ubuntu. Other gender-based violence-related offenses, one of the provisions states that a person who removes an organ from any person's body. You know, we had a lot of this happening in 2016 in Zambia when we were going through election campaigns. It was a very sad thing. Nobody knows the source and why, but it was very rampant at one point. Takes away the child from the lawful mother of that child after she gives birth. We've all seen the contemporary news in Kenya. There was a whole documentation of the prevalence of this offense. It was such a thing to look at, and it was so sad. Without lawful authority, makes, produces, or alters any identity or travel document, whether actual or purported, in the course of furtherance of an offense under this law, obtains, procures, destroys, conceals, removes, confiscates, withholds, alters, replicates, possesses, or facilitates the fraudulent use of another person's travel or identity document with the intent to commit or to facilitate the commission of offense under this law, also commits an offense. Discloses without lawful authority to another person any information acquired in the course of his or her official duties that enables or leads to the identification of a victim or witness. It's also offense. Instigates a person to commit an act of gender-based violence. That's an offense. Instigates a person to take part in obscene publication or obscene display. That's an offense. So we actually urge the governments to review and reform laws relating to harmful criminalization or coercion practices based on a person's sexuality, sexual activity, HIV status, gender or age, with the aim of abolishing such laws so as to protect a person's security, well-being, health, accessibility to services, and reduce vulnerability to gender-based violence. We deal also with prohibitions relating to gender-based violence, where we urge the minister responsible for the criminal justice system, in consultation with the minister responsible for justice, to develop sentencing policies and penalties to eliminate all forms of gender-based violence, prevent and eliminate all harmful social and cultural practices, eliminate child marriages and forced marriages, restrict marriage blocking, abolish slavery and trafficking in persons, and deter female genital mutilation. So a perpetrator shall be tried by a judicial institution of competent jurisdictions. And then we go on to actually look at perpetrators and how these should be dealt with in the criminal justice system. We also provide for intervention programs for perpetrators and alternative sentencing. I'm sure you're all very familiar with alternative sentencing for perpetrators and what intervention programs are appropriate to actually rehabilitate these perpetrators. So you can see the model law does not leave out the issue of perpetrators. We adequately deal with perpetrators as much as we have dealt with the victims. Then we have also dealt with factors to be taken in account when imposing imprisonment. I think these are good guidelines for the judiciary. And if these are actually implemented, then there'll be justice to the victims. For example, we say the offense, we say if this, then let me read it out, I think it's important. A judicial institution shall take into consideration the following factors when sentencing a perpetrator and shall impose an imprisonment term if these factors are present in offenses punishable by imprisonment, but with an option of a fine or alternative penalty. The offense involves serious injury or death of the victim or another person, including death as a result of suicide. The offense involves a victim who is particularly vulnerable, including a pregnant woman. We've heard this from our chairman. We've heard the sad stories that have occurred in South Africa. The victim was deprived of liberty. The victim is physically or mentally handicapped. The victim is a child. The offense involves more than one victim. The crime was committed as part of the activity of an organized criminal group or more than one perpetrator. Drugs, medications, or weapons were used in the commission of the offense. A child has been adopted for the purposes of exploitation, which is very common. The perpetrator has been previously convicted for the same or similar offense. The perpetrator is a state or public official. The perpetrator is a spouse or conjugal partner of the victim, and the perpetrator is in a position of responsibility or trust in the relation of the victim. So let me stop there. The rest deal with protection and prevention and intervention measures, putting in place support services for the victim. I would rather that these are dealt with and we go through them with service providers. I know you're a service provider, community helpers, traditional and religious authority. So let me stop there for now to give you more time. As you can see, this law is very comprehensive. It will take 2 or 3 days to really sit down physically for us to go through each and every provision, but that's not possible virtually. It's very, very difficult. So I invite you, my law enforcement officers, to thoroughly now debate this model law so that we can enhance it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eva. Unfortunately, we cannot clap for you, the downside of these virtual meetings. But otherwise, thank you very much for that very comprehensive and well-articulated presentation on the model law. You have really expounded on issues that affect law enforcement, and I am sure they are itching to say something with regard to the model law and the responsibilities in the law that you have just talked about. Now, without further ado, I know we are pressed for time. I would like to open the floor to our distinguished delegates to give us their comments, questions, as Ms. Gala is here and is listening, waiting to hear from you and respond to all your concerns. We could use the hand raising facility that we have below under the screen there, or you can just chip in and say something because I don't see any hands. Who is going to open the floor? Distinguished delegates, we would like to hear from you. Your feedback, please, because I know we have all read this model law, but of course, we add the explanations that Ms. Jala has given. We should definitely have something to say with regard to this law. Any hands, any takers?
Barbara.
Yes, sir. Please take the floor.
Bob, it's South Africa. It's South Africa. It's Lawrence here in South Africa.
Yes, sir. You can have the floor. Thank you.
You know, I'm BBT. I'm a BBT. I'm born before technology. I'm trying to get this. You know, how can I raise my hand, but I can't. You know, Barbara, mine is not a question. Mine is not a question. I mean, the presentation was so excellent, man. And then I went through the presentation and then I love it. One thing that I can tell you is that, the only thing that needs to be done, it is the shifting of the mindsets. It's a shifting of the mindsets, how we approach things and everything, because there are, other role players involved here. I listened to the presenter when she was talking about, how the victims should be handled, more especially when they come to, a foreign environment, like, a court building. To some of them, they've never been in a court building before, and then they need to be, to be assisted in that regard. And then how the prosecutors should, approach the whole thing. I think we need to, go down as countries. We need to go down to, the other role players, take them through this, this moral law, explain to them that, guys, the time of doing things differently has now come. I mean, those old ideas of, leaving the poor witness to be harassed by the defense during cross-examination, trying to anger her in order to get a loophole whereby, the perpetrator can, can be, found not guilty. Those things need to be discussed with the prosecutors to say, guys, you are the masters of the case, and then it is your responsibility to protect the witness because of the victim, because of the witness is your own witness, and then the magistrates also need to come to the party. They must not just leave it to the prosecutors where, they feel that the cross-examination is now becoming, a bias. It is now, getting out of line. That is where the magistrates must come in. But what is important is that, we as the law enforcement officers, when we take the cases to the prosecutors, we need to discuss these cases with the prosecutor. Because if I'm the person who knows my weaknesses, my weakness, and I know even now, her weaknesses and her strong points, we need to discuss this thing with the with the prosecutors or the other role players, so that at the end of the day, justice must not only be done, it must seem to be done. That is my comment on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, South Africa, for that comment on shifting of the mindset. It's really important, because otherwise we would be going around in circles, and then we don't change anything if we don't work on this first. Ms. Jala, do you have a comment? Because I don't see any other hand as of yet. You want to say something on that?
So very happy, thank you very much for your kind words and the support which I can see already coming from the law enforcement officer in relation to this model law. I'm sure with your support,
Madam
Eva.
Yeah. I thought
you're
it was just
waffling. Your microphone is making you.
Speaking in it. Is that hello?
We still cannot hear you, ma'am.
Can you hear me now?
Not clearly. You're still not audible.
That better? Is that better? I think then proceed. Just proceed, because it will be logging out again and coming back in.
Yeah, I think we should try that too.
Madam Eva? Hello,
Yeah.
Madam Eva? As it was done in the morning, this happened in the morning, remember? Please disconnect yourself and reconnect. I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the meantime, as we wait for Madam Eva, I would like to see hands, which I'm not seeing in the participants list. This is our time. As people who deal with these things every day, it's our time now to say something. We need to bring our experiences to Madam Eva so that they are considered, and we make sure that we have a model law that is practical. So I am not sure who is going to take the floor first after Madam Eva comes back. I see a hand from Botswana. I recognize Botswana. We just wait for Madam Eva to come back, but I see you. I see you, Botswana. Thank you. Anyone else to take the floor after Botswana? I'm not sure. I don't ask to reach where we have to go by member states. I am
Okay.
waiting for. Yes, yes. Welcome back, ma'am.
Thank
We
you.
have
Am
the hand
I
from
loud and clear?
Botswana. Yes, you are. We
Okay.
have the hand
I was
from
just saying, I'm so happy and thankful to the chairman. He said very kind words, and I'm so excited as to the general support I can feel, I can hear coming from our law enforcement officers. I'm sure with their support, the model law will have easy passage within our member states because they'll be there, whether it's at the executive stage of the process or the parliamentary stage of the legislative process, to ensure that they give support to this model law, because there are major stakeholders in its implementation. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for that comment. I now see a hand from Malawi as well, but we'll start with Botswana. After Botswana takes the floor and has given its comment, Malawi, please. Botswana, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me first, just like my chair has just said here, congratulate the presenter for the studied work that she has done. And we very much appreciate what you did in drafting the model law. And we believe it will go a long way in assisting us to formulate our municipal legislations in addressing this concerning issue at GBV within our borders. However, I may wish to, at the inception, at the beginning of the model law, the intention appears to have been very straight, that it's just the violence in its entirety. With the
You're breaking.
Botswana, we cannot hear you.
It has now, sorry. Am I clear now?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe you can start from the beginning, because you had said something important on the intentions of the model law, and then you broke.
Yes, the model law is going to go a long way in assisting us in formulating our municipal legislations to against. Am I clear?
Yes,
together?
yes.
Yeah.
We have lost you again.
Botswana?
I was. Yes, Barbara, are we together?
Yes, now we can hear you, but we have to start all over again.
This internet thing is causing a lot of havoc. Eh?
I wish we could meet physically. Then we'll do a good job. Internet is hard.
Yes, Botswana, are you there? Maybe Botswana will just have to use the chat facility to give us its comment, because otherwise we are not making much progress here. Can I please give the floor to Malawi as we wait for Botswana to say something in the chat or come back when they have a better connection? Malawi, please.
Madam Chair, first of all, I have to congratulate the presenter. I really like the contents of the model law, and they will help much in at least improving our service delivery, especially to the victims. Most of the times we used to sideline the victims' rights, and it will be like a very good guide and reference point when the member states are at least reviewing their laws. However, I would like to say that maybe when disseminating the model laws has to be really, it has really to come to the people's minds that in some of the cases of gender-based violence, we have suspected persons who may not have committed the crimes in reality. So at least when using the law, we have to remember that every suspected person is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a competent court of law. So this law should not be like abused by law enforcers and ending up in leading to ill treatment of suspected persons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malawi. I am sure Ms. Stella has taken note of your comment. I see comments in the chat by Angola. Angola, can I please give you the floor so that you expound on what you have put in the chat? Angola, you have the floor. Angola, you have the floor, please.
Outras Angolas. Não Angola, sobre se Angola polícias. Fala. Muito boa tarde. Olha para a câmera.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the flow. We, Angola, would like to provide our inputs to this meeting. However, unfortunately, the Angola National Police only acknowledged receipt of the draft model law of SADC and in English draft. And still today, we started translating it into Portuguese. It would be really good for us if we had the Portuguese draft for us to be able to review it and provide our inputs for today. However, we do not have a lot to provide us our inputs, but we ensure you that immediately the translation is made, we will see whether or not it will be possible for us to submit our inputs for the draft law. Maybe today or later, we could be able to do it and submit it to the Regional Bureau of Interpol in Harare. It is also worth noting that Angola has a law on domestic violence where we deal with issues on the under gender-based violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angola. I stand to be corrected, but just to inform you that we already have a translated version of the model law. Ms. Kelly is going to confirm on this, and it will be made available to you as soon as we can if it wasn't, because it was made available for dispatch. But we will confirm that and get back to you as soon as we can. But as the SG already said, we still have up to 10 September to provide the SADC PF or the SADC Secretariat, as well as the consultant with our comments. So I'm sure that will be sorted out between now and then. I see two hands from the SG and from the head of the Regional Bureau, Harare. I'll go with the SG first, and then we'll hear from the Regional Bureau. Zambia and Botswana, I recognize you. Let's hear from these two first, and then I'll give you the floor. SG, please, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barbara. Just to apologize for that and indicate that all the documents have been ready at the same time before dispatch. And when you go into the chat, we have also pasted all the documents in all the 3 languages. I'd also appreciate if emails can be dropped as we're sitting in the meeting. I will send these documents directly. Both the PowerPoint in English, French, and Portuguese have been pasted on the chat box. You could kindly download them. Thank you, Ms. Barbara.
Thank you very much, SG. So we've read her. Let us drop our emails in the chat box so that they can send the documents to us at a later stage, much as they've already been posted in the chat. Thank you very much, SG, for that clarification. Mr. Nawa, head of the region of Bureau, please.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Just to remind the member states that it is very important that when we have a task like this, we should take time to prepare and avoid issues of accusing the Secretariat and Arabi Harare of not having sent documents to them. On the 6th of August, 2021, at 15:12 p.m., we sent the French, Portuguese, and English documents to the respective member countries. If Angola can check, on the 6th of August at 15:12 p.m., we sent those documents they are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nawa, for that clarification as well. I am sure Angola is going to follow up on the documentation, but as the SG has already said, the document has been reposted in the chat. So Angola will still be expecting your comments before the 10th of September 2021, because you now have the documents in the chat, in your emails, and everywhere else. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Zambia. After Zambia, Botswana, you will have the floor. I thank you. Zambia, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. All protocols observed. Yeah, our comment is that the model law is comprehensive and provides a lot of comprehensive provisions. However, it is important to note that the law will remain without impact if it is not domesticated in respective SADC member states. Therefore, it is important that probably the political leadership in the respective member states are engaged in advance to ensure that when it comes to domestications of these laws, there are no difficulties. I think this going forward, this is our comment from Zambia Police. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zambia. Botswana, you have the floor. I recognize Namibia and Tanzania. Botswana, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me try again.
Yes, please, you're now loud and clear.
Yeah, thank you. Let's hope it will remain that way. I was saying we are pleased with the work that was done by the presenter, and it's going to go a long way in assisting us in so far as the formulation of the municipal legal framework is concerned. And we're just trying to highlight that even as we appreciate the gravity of the issue that we are trying to address here, being GBV, we should try by all means to the extent possible, especially when we are coming up with the legal framework, to ensure that we make it gender neutral and try by all means to avoid a situation where we are going to have it being skewed to one gender to the exclusion of the other. These days, you know, we are living in situations or at times where the issue of gender is a very thin line, and it may, if we were to make laws which are skewed in that fashion, create a problem where now one gender becomes alienated or something like that. So otherwise, I think the model law will assist us to a very large extent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope Ms. Jara now got the comment that was coming from Botswana. We still have 2 more hands, and then I'll throw it back at Ms. Jara to respond to the comments that have been given. Namibia, you have the floor, after which I'll give the floor to Tanzania. Namibia, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Deputy Commissioner Joanna Satute, Head of the Gender-Based Violence Protection Division. I would like to upload all the presenters on the insightful, informative presentations they have made. We are actually quite impressed and also happy with the model law that was presented to us in the first place. And everything that is included in this model law is of paramount importance. So it's quite a comprehensive instrument, and I will start off with the response services. Response services that was presented. It's very important for us as law enforcement, and our attitudes should be, intact if it comes to service provision, because we know what to do, but the way we do it is also a problem. But it was emphasized so much so that we need to address, the attitudes of those that deals with gender-based violence, but not only them, also the police station level. So capacity building to happen at all levels, of policing. And we also know about compromised values if it comes to, service delivery. There was presented about, some officers that may be bribed or that may, practice corruption throughout the service delivery. So those also need to be dealt with accordingly, because sometimes it happens that we keep these officers for too long. And mind us, at times we are not actually helpful to those that are doing this job, especially where secondary trauma is impacting individuals. These type of things might happen, and people are compromising what they are supposed to do. So debriefing of these people concurrently with capacity building that is ongoing is very critical. Another one is on the preventative responses, which means that we need to strengthen that area, because we can never say it's enough. Because as it was presented, gender-based violence is just, getting worse and worse on a daily basis. And it's even more evident in home settings where people are supposed to be safe during this COVID-19. And statistics has it that it was even increasing in the homes, the households, settings within homes where children, for instance, the vulnerable ones, were supposed to be safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we need to promote those good cultural practices while we are uprooting harmful cultural practices. And it should be a continuous intervention. Victim protection, that is also a very paramount, should be addressed, especially from the onset when a case is registered or reported to the law enforcement. Risk assessment should come in immediately, and as we are assessing risk as law enforcement, it is also expected that we come up with a risk management plan, and then we make sure that we implement this risk assessment plan. And we have come up as Namibia with a standing operating procedure, the one for trafficking in persons that I'm sitting with, as well as the one for gender-based violence we launched on the 7th of September, and the human rights-based approach is also included. We actually are starting in this standing operating procedures document with the guiding principles that refers to the human rights-based approach. So we also cannot ignore the fact that we need a coordinating body. And it's good that since 2007, when we had the National Conference on Gender-Based Violence for the first time, initiated by the head of state of Namibia, we came up looking at the challenges. And in 2014, we have established the different clusters, of which human rights and gender-based violence cluster is actually coordinating all mechanisms as well as tools, as well as implementation of plans at that level. So the HR and GBV cluster is actually coordinating and having us around the table, and are also assessing whether we do justice to the plans we are coming up with. So we are actually opportune that we have such a coordinating body in place since 2014. And as Gender-Based Violence Protection Division said, is 17 operational within the country. We also are in the process of working on a monitoring and evaluation tool that will revisit whether we do justice and implement.
DRC, kindly mute your mic. DRC, please mute your mic.
DRC, please go ahead.
DRC, kindly mute your mic. Thank you. Please proceed, Namibia.
An evaluation tool we are working at currently, which will actually make sure that we are implementing this roles and responsibilities that we have put in a document, such as the standing operating procedures on gender-based violence. So we are working towards that direction. And then the last one was on the database on GBV. It is true that it's actually a gray area. Also, the area of studies and researches that was done so far on gender-based violence, they are so few that was being conducted. So we need also really to strengthen that area as a matter of urgency. And the database, as I have already alluded on, we definitely see it as very important if we want to have harmonized, reliable, and comprehensive, data on gender-based violence. And we have established or developed one, actually free units within the 17, and we are busy, with pilot that will end on the 30th of November, and then that database on GBV for Namibia will also be launched with the standing operating procedures on the 7th of December. But all in all, we are happy, although we don't have any bill on our own standalone GBV law. We have other legal frameworks that are helping us to enforce GBV in the country. The effectiveness and the efficiency is something else that also one can never say that everything is going well, because we have this beautiful legislation, but the other aspect is again the implementation part that is also questionable because of attitudes of people, not that they don't know what to do, but the way they do things. So that was basically our contribution from the Namibian side. But there's something, a challenge that we are facing if it comes to crime that are committed by other nationals, like in cases of when a person is working for a diplomatic staff member, maybe at an embassy, committing a crime for gender-based in Namibia. We are facing some challenges there because we had a case, unfortunately, it's a case that is not existing anymore because of the fact that the suspect has, passed on, but there was, during that stage, we had some feedback telling us that for GBV, that person cannot stand trial in Namibia unless the person is probably, there are elements that implicate that person, and then the person will be tried back in the country. So in such instances, I would like to know what can be done. Thank you. That is our submission.
Thank you very much, Namibia, for those detailed comments. I'm sure Ms. Jala has taken note of each and every comment that you've made, and she's going to say something about it. I would now like to call Tanzania to the floor before we give the floor back to Ms. Jala to give her comments. Tanzania, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
DRC. I hear you loud and clear. Ms. Nene, please mute your mic. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you so much for the useful document, and I extend a note of appreciation. Here in Tanzania Police Force, we have established a gender desk almost in all police stations. So having this modulo will enhance and strengthening personnel capacity to investigate cases of gender-based violence. This will be done after domesticated in our registration. But one thing I want to ask from you, I have captured one thing in investigation. Investigation, it is. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Please proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Investigation on gender-based violence, it has a challenge, but having this modulo, I think, will be useful and helpful in doing all that for we police officers.
Thank you very much, Tanzania. We heard you loud and clear. Now I would like to throw back the floor to Ms. Eva for her comments. But of course, there's another comment in the chat, which I am going to read at a later stage. Ms. Jala, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Let me first thank all the speakers for the congratulatory remarks they have given. You are very kind, and we are most appreciative. Dealing with Malawi, she talked about that a person is innocent until proven guilty. Yes, we acknowledge those doctrines of law, and the GBV model law is cognizance of them. What we have done is provide an effective procedure for assessment. So if your assessment and your investigations are done on the correct premises and the correct trajectory is used, then you find that your support, your evidentiary support will help you prosecute a case effectively. What we want at the end of the day is effective handling and prosecution of the case, so that in most instances, at least we can get a conviction of the right perpetrator. So if you assess your case and investigate it well, the chances that you are going for the wrong person will be minimized. So thank you very much for these enlightenments, and we will make sure that we are not shifting the burden. Angola, you talked about, okay, now that has been resolved for Angola, thank you very much. Zambia, you talked about the comprehensive nature of the GBV model law, but you urged member states that domestication is very important. In the GBV model law, we've tried to emphasize the issue of domestication, and we have tried to provide the different approaches that member states can take. Those who are dealing with the monist procedure, and those who are dealing with a dualistic procedure. But we agree with you, Zambia, that we need to engage the political leaders at an early stage, so that we can actually domesticate this very important model law into our national legislative systems. Thank you very much, Zambia. Botswana, we've heard you loud and clear this time, and we thank you for your comments and that you are pleased with the model law, so that it will assist you in dealing with the GBV, which is a very grave offense. And you've urged us to use gender neutral terms, which we shall endeavor to use, bearing in mind that the dominant partner here is male normally. So we try to also focus in a little bit more detail on the weaker partner, that is the women and marginalized groups and children. So we don't want to lose too much focus on those, that sector of our community. But yes, the law provides for both. It provides for the male gender as well as for the female gender. Thank you very much. The Namibian comments, again, very well presented, and thank you for the applause. I'm also very delighted to see that you are making a lot of progress in your pursuit of GBV in your countries, and a lot of information and processes and procedures are now being put in place to respond effectively to GBV. I'm also agree with you that the police need a lot of capacity building, and this is provided for very profoundly in the GBV model law. Towards the end, you'll see that we provide for training of police officers, the judiciary, even going as far as personalities or functionaries in the private sector. Another issue that you have raised is in relation to providing a coordinating body. Yes, very good, and I think that will help in populating the GBV model law. As for databases, the model law does provide for it. In fact, we encourage tracking of both the victims and the perpetrators, so that you build up jurisprudence in respect to the cases that you have handled, which will help future cases and procedures in tackling such cases. We also provide profoundly for evaluation and monitoring provisions in the GBV model law, which I think, if seriously taken by member states, will actually help effective implementation of the law. Tanzania, thank you very much again for the compliments to the team that drafted this model law. And we're happy to know that you have now established gender-based violence desks in police stations. That's greatly helpful. And hopefully they are user-friendly so that a victim is free to tell his or her story to the law enforcement officers. We agree on the domestication issues, and we need to follow them up as member states very vigorously so that we can, as soon as the GBV model law is adopted by the high-level institutions of the SADC PF, work is started immediately. So we will take the ground running. So we are happy to know that there are a lot of challenges, but which you are dealing with respect to GBV, and especially in relation to your investigation procedures. Thank you very much for your comments. We shall look at them in more detail when we are processing amendments to the GBV model law. Thank you. I hope I've captured everybody that made comments.
Yes, you have. I'm sure if there's anyone who feels they have not been responded to, they're going to raise their hand again. I see your hand, Ms. Gumede, but before I come to you, there's a comment from Kija Banka, which says, thank you, Madam Presenter, for comprehensive document. This document will help us when we deal with GBV cases, but the problem is about laws which govern us, which allow the suspect to be bailed for such offenses like rape. Hence, it becomes difficult to handle the issue of GBV cases. I'm not sure from which member state the comment is from, but that is what they're saying. And from Seychelles, they say we can clearly see the passion and hard work that has gone into the development of the model law. It will allow us from the Seychelles police to review our policing and improve our training curriculum. So there you have it, Ms. Dala, comments from Seychelles and from one of the member states, which is not indicated for your attention. Ms. Gumede, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And again, like all the previous speakers, Ms. Jala, really this is a very comprehensive model law and well presented to the member states. But what I want to bring maybe to the attention of our member states is the following. We have noted really with great concern that some of the member states and particularly the participants from some of the member states have been informed quite late to participate in this very important meeting, which is actually looking at a model law. And it would have been really good that each one of you looked at it before you came to attend the meeting. But nonetheless, this has not been the case because some of you were informed quite late and some of you did not receive the documents. We noted, as Mr. Nawa said, that Angola also mentioned the issue of translated versions, but these documents were sent together with the English version. Our concern is that member states, when nominating participants, just do it, in the last minute, and this does not, suit the meaning of you attending this kind of meetings. You are actually the service providers, and we as the Secretariat, together with Regional Bureau Harare, our role is to coordinate and make sure that such kind of meetings as this one takes place. You are provided a platform wherein you are supposed to come and air your views and also ensure that your contribution is heard, your contribution is actually considered, for example, on this one by the consultant. And if that does not happen because you did not receive the documents in advance, then it does not serve the purpose why we are coordinating meetings such as this one. It's really important for us as the Secretariat, and surely for the consultant, Ms. Jala, to get your views and to ensure that whatever your contributions are from your member state are also considered in this model law. Because at the end of the day, this is something that is going to be domesticated in your member country. So it's quite important that you look at this. So I wish to remind all the member states present here that if you have not received the documents, maybe in advance for you to get through it or to go through it and make your own contributions, we kindly request that you do so. And if you did not receive it, I'm sure that you can already download the documents that have been posted by our colleagues in the chat, and go through it, make contributions, and still submit those contributions through the Regional Bureau Harare. You all know the email address of the Regional Bureau Harare. I think that will be the simplest thing to do. Please go through this because it's important for us to get your views as the police sector, and share those views through the Regional Bureau Harare, and then they will be shared with our consultant, who will then include them in the document. That is what I wanted to really remind member states, and hopefully that in the future it will not happen the way it is happening now. It's really concerning, and please try to advise also your NCBs to circulate the documents that the Regional Bureau Harare submit to the NCBs. Thank you very much. Barbara, please just remind them of the date that they can still contribute or make their contributions and submit to the Regional Bureau Harare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gumede. We still have up to 10 September to submit our comments. We still have up to 10 September to submit our comments. And please don't forget to register in the chat, put your email addresses in the chat as well as Ms. Gumede has already said. There's another comment from Eswatini, and it says, we applaud the good work done that has been to this document. The document will help us a long way in domesticating the same. That is a comment from Eswatini. There's a comment from Angola, which I cannot read. Maybe they'll have the floor at a later stage to say what they've said in the comment, or the Portuguese interpreter can help us with that so that we know what they are saying in the chat. There's a comment from Angola. Portuguese interpreter, please help us with that.
The comment from Angola, excuse me, the comment is, can you please resend the document here in this chat box? The request is to please place the document, in other words, the model law, here in this chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Angola, you can scroll the messages up. We will find the model law in Portuguese as one of the documents that has been posted in the chat today. If you scroll up the chat, you will find the model law posted already in Portuguese in the chat, and that has been done today and this afternoon. I don't see any other hands. I will therefore throw the floor back to Ms. Jala. And looking at the time, after Ms. Jala gives us her comments, if at all there is no any other comment, we will proceed with our program to the rapporteur, who is going to highlight the issues that are to be infused in the draft GBV model law, after which we will have a closing remarks by the head of the Regional Bureau, Mr. Mubita Nawa, and then we end the meeting at 5 o'clock if we are going to make the time. Ms. Jala, please. Thank you.
Thank you. There's nothing much for me to say, but to assure the lady, I think, who talked about bail, and the Seychelles who talked about the review, training, that we shall ensure that the model law actually tightens these provisions, and so that comprehensive training is actually done to all public service workers who are involved with GBV. The issues on bail, we shall relook at them and see how effective we can make them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jala. I don't see any new hands. I will therefore give the floor to the rapporteur to give us the highlights. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Barbara. All protocol observed. So in terms of the highlights of issues to be infused in the draft model law on GBV, I wish to update the meeting that most of the highlights that came were recommendations around what is to be done or how the model law will be used. There have been amazing validation, congratulatory messages, and appreciation and acknowledgement of the comprehensiveness of the draft model law on GBV. Issues that then came for consideration are issues around suspects to be treated as innocent until proven guilty by the court of law. Then there was an emphasis on relooking or ensuring that the language that is in the model law protects also suspects so that they are not abused by enforcement agents or being ill-treated because they are simply suspected persons. And then the second one was also on the language of the model law to be consistent in ensuring that it is gender responsive in a manner that does not leave any gender behind. Then there was another input where there was the issue around gender-based violence being perpetrated by other nationals, specifically for those that are in diplomatic settings. So the model law to just relook and ensure that it is comprehensive enough to cover also those that are of other nationals in other countries as well. Then the other issue that came was the issue of relooking on the bail conditions, and then the issue around strengthening the capacity development for all the role providers. So I would say most of the other highlights came into when the model law is there. It was exciting to see how some member states were sharing how they will review their police training curriculum, and others who are now sharing also best practices on how they are strengthening their response in protection of victims. Thank you. I submit to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. That summarizes the comments and questions that were brought forward. We agree, and I'm sure the rest of the distinguished delegates agree as well. I will not waste more time. I would now like to invite Mr. Mubita Nawa, the head of the Interpol Regional Bureau Harare, to give us his concluding remarks. Thank you, Mr. Nawa, you have the floor.
Just waffling. Thank you very much. Before I proceed, probably just on the highlights, let me recognize and probably ask that I ride on the protocols already established at the start of this meeting, because I note we have a lot of distinguished dignitaries among ourselves, and therefore allow me to simply say a very good afternoon to all of you. Firstly, a point of note, I think I noted where we have the acronym SMSs used. I believe that with guidance from the Secretariat, that should be SADC MSs, SADC MSs instead of SMSs. I think in terms of SADC that should be accepted. Indeed, from the presentations, from the discussions, it is very clear that there is a consensus on the gravity of gender-based violence. And therefore, there is a need for consensus in trying to handle this challenge of gender-based violence. And the constitution of this meeting this afternoon, the diversity that we see in the people that are attending, attests to the fact that indeed, as a region, we are willing to come together from different sectors in order to combat gender-based violence. The case study that was given by South Africa is quite touching, and I would want to say from a regional perspective that indeed that is the scenario and the situation in not only in South Africa, but in the rest of our member states. Again, we recognize the role that police or law enforcement play as frontliners in dealing with these challenges, as well as the effect of harmful practices that have always made the investigation or the smooth processing of gender-based violent cases through the justice system to become problematic. Indeed, as we deal with transnational organized crime, which includes gender-based violence, it is very important that we recognize the need to have the model laws that are going to serve as a guide in order for us to uniformly deal with these issues. We do have different laws in our member states, which in some instances, a matter that may be considered as a crime in the Republic of Namibia may not necessarily be considered as such in the neighboring Republic of Zambia. And therefore, if we are to work in unison as a regional grouping, we need to ensure that the model law is indeed domesticated. Of course, we do have challenges where, because of our cultural backgrounds and beliefs, some of the issues that may be highlighted in the model law might be in contrary to our beliefs. But it is our responsibility as law enforcement and all the other different stakeholders to ensure these things are brought to the fore so that we avoid the lacuna that may be caused as a result of our domestic laws. Most are times when in our society, we often pay attention to issues of physical forms of gender-based violence. Yet, the other silent forms of this vice, such as financial, emotional, and sexual gender-based violence, continue to happen on a daily basis. It is time that as stakeholders, as law enforcement, we need to focus on these issues. Psychosocial counseling services also need to be provided to our victims. Of course, we have noted the high withdrawals that have always been influenced by the cultural beliefs, where probably a wife will not be expected to report the husband because there is a saying that if you report your husband and he goes to jail, he happens to be the breadwinner and therefore the family shall suffer. These are all issues that affect the smooth investigation and prosecution of gender-based violence cases. The importance of safe havens for victims of gender-based violence cannot be overemphasized. On the other hand, we also note that while we have a few safe havens for victims of gender-based violence, most of these are meant for women and children, while the men do not have safe havens as and when they are also affected by gender-based violence. Despite all these challenges, we still have hope as we have the following Interpol policing capabilities that are at the doorstep of all the member states. These tools can support us or can help us in combating gender-based violence. Among them, we do have the notice systems, such as the PEPO notice, which shares with the member states on the modus operandi or on the exact way of how these cases are being perpetrated or are being conducted. The other one is the red notice, which assists the member states in tracking down the fugitives, such that when a perpetrator of this vice is on the loose, they can be flagged on a red notice so that they are intercepted anytime they try to cross borders. Apart from that, we also do have other databases that we can use to support the fight against gender-based violence. We do have the DNA database. We also have the forensics analysis. All these tools put together and utilized appropriately are going to increase the number of convictions in gender-based violence, thereby putting the perpetrators of gender-based violence where they belong. As your regional office, together with the SADC Secretariat, we often conduct operations that are aimed at thwarting the activities of gender-based violence. For instance, an Interpol-led operation dubbed Blacklist, which was a 2-year international crackdown on child abuse, was conducted in the year 2019. In the Southern Africa region, we also have a special operation, which is spearheaded by our female law enforcement officers, dubbed Operation Basadi, which is held twice every year in the month of May and in the month of November. The objective of this operation is to target perpetrators of gender-based violence against women, children, and other vulnerable communities. From the presentations also from Council Jala, we also were given the guidance on the various mechanisms that as member states we need to put in place if we are to effectively and efficiently fight transnational organized crimes, especially gender-based violence. SADC has got a lot of documents that we need to use. However, these policy documents, these strategies, regional strategies, can only be helpful if us as law enforcement and other stakeholders on the ground are able to translate the guidance that has been given into actual action to ensure that we send a strong message to the perpetrators of gender-based violence. With these few highlights, it is my fervent hope that we are indeed going to work together to take further action in actualizing the utilization of this wonderful document that has been developed for us to support the member states in the fight against gender-based violence. Once again, I thank the producer of this document. I thank the member states for participating and for authenticating the ownership of this wonderful product that has been made for us. Together, we can beat gender-based violence. Thank you very much to our interpreters, to the participants, and all colleagues that has made this meeting a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nawa, head of the Interpol Regional Bureau in Harare, for your remarks. That sums up all that has been discussed this afternoon in this meeting, and at the same time, it marks the end of our consultation meeting on the SADC GBV model law. But still, just a reminder, we still have up to 10 September to submit our comments on the model law. So it is not too late. We read the model law and submit our comments through the Regional Bureau Harare, or through the SADC Secretariat, through the SADC PF, or direct to the drafter of the model law, Ms. Dala. And from me, I would like to thank everyone as well for being a very good audience. You made my job this afternoon very easy. Thank you very much all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Keep
you.
a safe distance, sanitize, put on your masks.
Thank you so much from Tanzania.
Bye-bye. Thank you.